On the Alex Salmond Show this week, knife crime in London has dominated the headlines. This week, the Home Secretary announced a new approach. He calls knife crime a virulent disease. In Scotland, we called it an infection, one that was curable, not inevitable. He says he's going to copy the public health model from Scotland. But can he get all-party buy-in? And what do the people working on the ground think about the politicians' approach? To find out, join us on the Alex Salmond Show, on air and online.
Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show and the start of a two-part series on the issue of violence in the communities of London. Over recent months, knife crime has emerged as a national crisis, as it's been described in the House of Commons. Although serious violence afflicting many communities is not new, it has reached a tipping point over the last year as figures surged to their highest levels for more than a decade. On a daily basis, our television screens and newspapers have been full of details of the latest mindless killings. In today's show, we report on the Home Secretary's speech of this week and ask, does it contain the new approach necessary to finally get to grips with knife crime? This is how he previously explained the new approach in the House of Commons.
The public health approach, which is something I announced towards the end of last year, and that again was through listening to experience from both other parts of the UK, from other countries as well, who have also seen a similar rise in serious violence. And I think we should learn from wherever we can, and I think it is important to have such an approach which requires all government departments, all agencies of government to treat serious violence as the way we would treat, for example, a disease, to prioritise it and to make it a statutory duty.
We also asked London MEP Claude Moraes to provide a response from Labour.
This pioneering approach that the Home Secretary was talking about, you know, it was pioneered in Scotland quite a while ago, and if I have one small criticism is that the government have come to this a little bit late, but at least they've done it because this is such a serious issue.
However, prominent anti-violence campaigner Dr Mark Prince questions whether any politician has thus far shown the right approach.
Have the Home Secretary or the Mayor of London, have they been beating up after your door and saying, you know, with that 12-year experience, Mark, what do you have to tell us about getting a message across to young people in deprived communities?
That's a real powerful question, but to answer that simply, no.
But first, your tweets, messages and emails in response to our show last week from Belfast, where Alex interviewed Eamon Malley. Lynn says, what an amazing interview. His statement about the DUP putting their sense of the union ahead of the economic welfare of the people of Northern Ireland was spot on. Fascinating interview. Glad you enjoyed it, Lynn. Terry says, another fantastic show. Whatever your viewpoint on independence, Brexit or even Alex Salmond, this programme is insightful, well worth a watch. Thank you, Terry. Louise says, interesting. Mr Malley probably spot on about who would restart violence. Republicans see a future and a tolerable present within the island. Young loyalists, well, I could see why they'd be split between getting as far away as possible and feeling marginalised. Mary White says, I'm not knowledgeable on Northern Ireland by any means, but as I wish for the repeal of the Acts of Union for Scotland, I also wish for peace and unification for the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland. And finally, Martha Dyer says, I don't think it's because of Brexit that Scotland's going for independence. Independence is overdue a long time ago. The chaos in Westminster has only helped to bring it to a head. Now, the Home Secretary's speech in East London this week was his first on crime. He used it to give a deeply personal explanation of why he was changing the approach on knife crime. It's not so difficult to see how I could have turned out to have a life of crime myself. These graphs show the extent of the problems with which the Home Secretary is grappling. The official statistics show three things. One, that the incidence of knife crime is not just a London problem. However, across England, it is heavily concentrated in the urban areas. 2, in London, although there are attacks everywhere, it is the capital's deprived areas which bear the brunt of the problem. And 3, figures over the last decade show knife crime at first falling and then rising rapidly to reach new highs in the last 2 years. Against this background, does the Home Secretary's new policy carry with it the hope of an all-party approach? Alex turned to Labour MEP Claude Moraes, who represents all the London communities most afflicted by the scourge of knife crime.
Claude Moraes, speaking from Strasbourg, you've heard the Home Secretary's speech this week about a new approach to knife crime, the public health approach, which was first adopted in your homeland of Scotland. Do you think that has a chance of cracking this serious problem?
Look, I think, Alex, that this pioneering approach that the Home Secretary was talking about, you know, it was pioneered in Scotland quite a while ago. And if I have one small criticism, is that the government have come to this a little bit late, but at least they've done it, because this is such a serious issue. I have a young non-white son growing up in London. It is such a serious issue. Almost you could say it should be cross-party almost. That it is good that he made the speech. And why was it good? Because the Glasgow model, as we could call it, really is the right model. I think it makes real sense that the National Health Service maps exactly what is happening to those 11 to 25-year-old victims. And that by mapping it, it gets to the bottom of exactly what is happening rather than speculating what is happening to these knife crime victims between those ages. So, of course, he was right to, I mean, the content of the speech was correct. The issue then, of course, is what you do about it. And again, he indicates some of the correct approaches. We now need to put resources behind that, Alex. You can't just leave it. There are a lot of people suffering out there. Yes, it's 20 deaths. But it's, you know, the amount of suffering around that and the amount of fear around that is quite immense, particularly in my constituency, London.
What are the hopes for an all-party approach? I mean, there's been some vigorous Conservative criticism of Sadiq Khan, the London mayor. Do you believe that criticism is unfair?
I think it's unfair, but I also think it's crazy. I think I despair of it because, as I mentioned, I'm in the position that many are in London, having young kids growing up in London. And me, my wife, we're genuinely concerned. And we're concerned because there is no real handle on this problem. Now, if we're going to get into a war of words between say the Conservatives and Labour, we have a mayoral election coming up, which everyone is aware of. And of course, this is the fodder for that kind of election. But then there are young kids carrying knives because they have to defend themselves. And it's not just the 20 deaths, but there are many, many injuries and a lot of fear out there, a lot of bullying going on in schools and outside school. So for that reason, to answer your question directly, I would love this to be an all-party approach. I'd love it to be the holistic approach that Scotland pioneered. That's what happened in Glasgow. And I don't like the idea that people keep avoiding what happened in Glasgow. Because what Glasgow points to is away from all the stereotypes that this is based entirely on race issues or it's based entirely on gang issues. Of course, there are all sorts of elements to this. But what Glasgow proved was if you have a public health-based, holistic approach, you take your time and you put resources into it, you can crack the problem, but it needs to be an all-party approach.
But in Scotland, that holistic approach, the violence reduction initiatives, the anti-gang initiatives, the experimental initiatives that took place, were combined with intensive use of stop and search powers. Will that be possible in London, where such powers have often come in for fierce criticism for their racial profiling?
That's a very good point, Alex. And I mean, I've been stopped myself in London. Indeed, I've been stopped outside London too. And I know that if that happens to my son as well, it is an issue. And I would address this head on. I would say that Glasgow is not London. And while you make the full approach of what happened in Glasgow, because I think it's the right one, you have to be sensible also, and you have to understand the particular needs of a massive city like London, 9.5 million people, some other particular issues there. And I think you have to be sensible about that. So policing in London, I think you just need to go according to some of the basic norms of policing, and then find out what is particular to London. And I think it doesn't upset the model of Glasgow to say that you can have vigorous stop and search, but you also have to be aware of profiling. You have to be aware that you don't create even more problems further down the line. And if I give you an example, Alex, I mean, I'm here in the European Parliament, I compare the issues in other countries. In France, where you have inner city knife crime amongst black communities, what is happening is you're not getting this surge in knife crime in particular. You do have stop and search. So there are other models, and I think we can, with the effort, we can get round this really thorny problem of stop and search as one element to dealing with this.
Claude Moraes, as a BME parliamentarian yourself, what message would you give to ethnic communities in London who perhaps fear that they've been left behind in the capital's prosperity? And in the Scottish approach, the use of the community payback, the seizing of assets of organised crime and devoting them to youth and community facilities, is there a lesson there for London?
I mean, I think, you know, people should really delve into this community cashback issue in Glasgow. There is organised crime in London. And if you say to communities, particularly BME communities, that this money is going to go back into youth empowerment, into those communities, that is a terrific message. And I would say that as a European politician, where that has happened in the really tough areas in Italy, in other urban areas, where we've had laws for confiscation and ensuring that very tough organised crime pay back to the community, it has really provided strength to the community, and it has reduced violent crime. In those cases, gun crime and so on, but here in Scotland and of course hopefully in London it will be knife crime. So this is a terrific message to send. So I know that this can work, but again it will be a particular London version. But really we need to look at Glasgow. Let's look at Glasgow. That's the key word, and the Home Secretary is finally doing it. So let's do it, get on with it, put the resources behind it.
And finally, Claude Moraes, looking at the London boroughs, which you represent, where the highest instance of knife crime has occurred, Haringey, Newham, Brent, Lambeth, Tower Hamlets, is this a social and economic issue as well as a crime and policing issue?
I think it is a socio-economic issue, Alex, and I think that, again, with the Glasgow project, I think you have to understand that we shouldn't shy away from those traditional issues of socio-economic background. It's become a kind of fashion almost to say that's got nothing to do with anything, but it has got a lot to do with it. And, you know, there are some more prosperous areas where some of this will not happen. Now, we have to be careful about it. We have to understand what is happening, which is why I like, again, the Glasgow approach, because it's based on public health, it's mapping it out in the NHS, it's getting to vulnerable youngsters when they're in that vulnerable state, when they have been attacked, so you have those teaching moments. Then you extrapolate after that, as they did in Glasgow. I mean, you know better than anyone, Alex, but as they then look at these wider demographic issues. Now, the problem is we're doing it the other way around at the moment in London and elsewhere. We're saying, oh, it's all gangland, it's these particular boroughs, and look at what they've got in common. Wink, wink, say no more. That is a problem because that's a stereotype and it's not actually reducing knife crime. It's not helping us. So the evidence is there. We need a different approach. Let's look at where we were successful. You know, Glasgow will not map directly onto London. Let's be subtle about it, but it's definitely the way forward.
Claude Moraes, speaking from Strasbourg, thank you very much indeed.
Coming up after the break, Alex speaks to Dr Mark Prince OBE, someone who reacted to his son's murder, not by seeking vengeance, but by embarking on a campaign to reduce the level of violence in the communities in which he grew up. We'll see you then. Welcome back. Now, we've heard from the politicians on knife crime. However, what is the reality on the ground in the deprived areas of London? Alex speaks now to leading campaigner Dr Mark Prince on his decade-long battle against the violence afflicting his communities.
Mark Prince found his salvation in boxing. Acceptance of the sports discipline turned his life around, from one of petty crime to huge effort and endeavour. In a spectacularly successful career, he won intercontinental titles at WBO and IBF level. Tragedy struck, however, in 2006, when his young son, Kyan, was killed in a knife attack at school. In this week's show, he tells us how he channeled his grief into campaigning against community violence and why public policy has to catch up with the realities of young people's lives. Although he received an OBE in recognition for his campaigning just this year, he reveals that no elected politician, from the Mayor of London to the Home Secretary as yet, has sought out his advice on how best to promote the anti-violence message.
Who are we?
Champions!
Who are we?
Champions!
Who are we?
Champions!
Who are we?
Champions!
Mark, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Now listen, tell a bit about yourself first. I mean, a bit about your background and a bit about how you got into boxing.
Okay, a little bit about me. I just think my problems at home growing up in a generation where there was a lot of harsh discipline for children, and mine resulted in it damaging me, like kind of mentally, you know, psychologically, emotionally. I ran away from home at 15, so I was homeless. I got into a life of sort of crime, drugs, stuff like that, and eventually I decided to get into boxing because it was a transferable skill. You know, I had a reputation for knocking people out and being violent on the street. So I thought, well, why can't I hone those skills and come away from being violent against people and go into a skillful sport? It was a vast change in my life. My change physically, change mentally, it cleared my mind. Just all areas of my life began to change, and I began to want to be someone. My self-confidence, my self-esteem, everything just grew.
And you had a hugely successful amateur and then professional career, basically coming from nowhere in the boxing ranks.
WBO and IBF Intercontinental Champion at light heavyweight. I continued my knockout ratio, 18 fights undefeated. I think it was 14 or 15 knockouts. I think it was 15 knockouts before I lost my first fight. And what a learning lesson it was, because, you know, we're all chasing after the zero and want to be undefeated to prove that we're the best. But when you look at the greatest fighters, we don't remember them for having a zero. We remember them for the characters they were, who they become as fighters, and the entertainment and the heart that they showed us as fighters in the ring, that they never gave up. They got up when things were bad. And this is what shows the real character of a man. And I learned about that when I was fighting as a fighter. And I think it really builds character. You find out who you are. That's why I equate boxing a lot to life itself, because you find out who you are as an individual as you're going through ups and downs, you know?
So then you retired from boxing,
Yeah.
retired through injury.
Early injury.
But emerged into a transformed existence, a family man. You've got two wonderful children.
Yeah.
And then in 2006, tragedy struck.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
You can only imagine what it was like when the phone got picked up and my oldest daughter, Tanisa, who's now 31 with her, giving me a beautiful grandson, Akai. She tells me over the phone that Kyan's been stabbed. She's got news from the school, and she finds out that my son's been stabbed, and obviously she's hysterical. I'm trying to stay calm, but my mind's just going crazy with all kind of thoughts. But I don't know enough, so that calmness and that professionalism in me tries to kick in and just tries to control me to be calm, don't go crazy, go and pick her up, let's find out what to do next, and we'll take it step by step. So that was my thought process, but during this process, I also said a prayer, which was quite profound, this prayer. I said openly when my daughter could hear me in the back of the seat, God, save my son. Don't let my son die. Don't let my son be killed. And then I quietly said, but if he dies, help me to accept it. I don't know where that came from. It came from inside of me, and I said it, but not so my daughter could hear. And then I started my journey. But little did I know the power of those few quiet words was going to have on the impact of what I was about to go through.
Now, Kyan had been killed at school trying to break up a fight, trying to act as a as a peacemaker in the fight, and
that's correct,
and had been killed as a result. Now, the loss of a child, but particularly the loss of a child under these circumstances, it must be the most body-wrenching blow for any parent.
Yeah, I don't know if I could get you to fully understand, or anyone listening to fully understand how deep this was, and how I found out that there's a fine bridge between sanity and insanity. There's a fine bridge between you living and you wanting to die. People that commit suicide, there's a fine bridge between you just not caring about your life at all and are willing to kill somebody just to try and give yourself some form of relief from the pain that you're feeling, that starts building up inside you and showing itself up physically. An emotional pain showing up physically, where you start passing out. And when you go to the hospital, they're telling you that we can't find anything wrong with you. It's the trauma that you've been through, because they've seen you on the news, they've seen what's happened, and they've recognised what the effect it's having on you.
Mark, tell me what kind of lad. I know that he was a talented footballer. I've seen the pictures.
But let's go into what he was as a person, because this is what I share with young people. As a person, Kayam was very calm, very laid back. What surprised me is that he didn't even go on about him being a top striker for Queen's Park Rangers, him being on the books with Queen Park. He wouldn't go boasting about it. So he was he's a really nice guy. He was just a regular, nice young person. Listen to the headmaster talk about him when we went to get his awards at his school ceremony, that he's a role model to all the other children. Now, I'm looking at my son thinking, wow, I didn't get none of that when I was in school. To hear my son getting these accolades from teachers when teachers told me I wouldn't amount to much, and hearing that my son's amounting to everything that I want him to amount to, that meant so much to me. So,
and Kayam was 15?
15 years old. Very, very calm, lovely guy, loved his music. Just a regular teenager, man.
So what was the moment that, can you share with us, when you decided that the way to acknowledge, accept and commemorate Kayam's death was through the launch of something to improve the lives of others?
Very early on. I wasn't fixed very early on. I was very angry very early on. I didn't get it all right, but throughout even the anger that I was suffering, I would always get moments of inspiration where I felt that my son could never have died for no reason. He could never just be gone and that's it.
So the Kind Prince Foundation, the KPF, as it's well known as. So how many youngsters over the last decade have received and gone through this messaging from the organisation?
84,000 young people since we began from 2007 to 2019.
That's amazing. Now, in terms of recognition, I mean, this year you received an OBE, a tremendous accolade for the work you've done.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in, with that very welcome recognition, have the Home Secretary or the Mayor of London, have they been beating up after your door and saying, you know, with that 12-year experience, Mark, what do you have to tell us about getting a message across to young people in deprived communities?
That's a real powerful question, but to answer that simply, no. The people, the leadership in charge haven't shown that this is their focus to resolve this issue, or that is common sense to focus on getting in contact with somebody who has sacrificed their life and have made changes, seen the difference and evidence it, and can obviously come back and show them what is working and what isn't working.
And Mark, you're a successful author now with the Prince of Peace. Why the title, the Prince of Peace?
It's a powerful title. It's a powerful title. Peace is the right word. That's a great message to send out. And that's why being the Prince of Peace is because I set the example. I set the trend. In my neck of the woods, in my hood, there was expected that I would get back and have revenge on the person that killed my son. But I gave peace and love and forgiveness back, and I think that's the right title for the book, Prince of Peace.
Do you think your message has a wider community impact?
I definitely think my message has impacted the community. They can see the communities are filled with fear for their own children, but we can have a greater impact if we sit down and strategically look at what change can we make as a community to say, let's change our narrative. Let's not talk about snitching and grassing anymore when it comes to killers. We don't want killers in our community. We want our children to grow up and be safe and have a life and have an opportunity to live and bring up their children. So we need to change this attitude, and I think if communities begin to think more strategically about how they can change these mindsets within our communities, we're going to see real change, because this is one of the massive problems that we have.
If you take an initiative like Stop and Search, which certainly on our experience in Scotland, we know is very much only part, but part of an approach. It's not the question of whether it should be done, it's how it's done.
How it should be done, not whether. We should not be upset because the police are stopping and searching. If young people are carrying knives, then I want them searched. And I teach my son that, listen, you know that a lot of young people are carrying knives, so if you go out, expect the police to stop and search you because they need to be doing their job. So I need you to conduct yourself as a civilized, calm individual to go along with what's happening. Take pictures, make sure you've got your form filled in and they've signed it. Go through the right process and make sure they're being respectful to you, because I think that we need to begin to action that and report police who aren't doing their job right.
Mark, you're taking this message nationwide in the Inspiring Future Champions campaign. Tell me a bit about that.
It's exciting. We go in the schools, we inspire these young people by being the self-evidence model of what they need to see in themselves. So I lived that life, I messed up, made mistakes, turned my life around, became #1 in Britain. That same potential is within them. It might not be boxing, it'll be something else. What it does, it gets them to believe in themselves, it empowers them, they want to become better. So once you leave them with that now, you don't have to go on about knife crime so much, because you ain't gonna carry a knife after now you believe in yourself that you have great potential. So this is what's bearing fruit at the moment.
Mark, I wish you great good luck in your endeavours. Now, to help you on your way, I present you with Alex Salmond Quake. Now, I don't know if you know the drill, you certainly couldn't do it when you were in training, but it's whiskey in the quake, and then you pass it round only your close friends.
Well, I'll try some of that tonight because I've got some backache that needs sorting out. Maybe the whiskey would help. Mark Prince, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
The story of Dr Mark Prince is a deeply personal and truly remarkable one. To channel personal tragedy into public campaigning speaks of will and determination of the highest level. It also shows an ability and a courage, even beyond anything he achieved in the ring. Mark's experience is compelling, but should also be part of public policy, which makes it all the more remarkable that as yet he has not been sought out by the policymakers. It is now an agreed strategy between the Mayor of London and the Home Secretary that they should follow the community health approach to tackling violence, the one pioneered in Scotland over a decade ago. But are they sure they understand the full implications? Next week we speak to the man who can tell them, former Scottish Justice Secretary Kenny MacAskill. Join us again to find out. Until then, from Tasmina and me and all at the show, it's goodbye for now.